I'm Mayor Jen Grigoraitis, and welcome to the Melrose Minute, where we bring you news you can use from City Hall. And I'm thrilled to again be joined today by Assistant City Auditor and incoming CFO, Kerri Golden. Welcome back, Kerri.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're thrilled you're here. And I do want to acknowledge that today's topic, free cash, was requested by a resident. So
Great.
Thank you to Lori A. for suggesting that we talk about this. So what is free cash? It's a term we hear a lot, especially now during the budget process. Can you explain to folks what that is?
Sure. So there's a couple components to free cash. So the first part is revenue. So revenues that are over what was estimated for the fiscal year go to free cash. So if there's a couple components to revenue. There's local receipts, there's taxation, new growth. So if new growth comes in higher than estimated, that rolls right to free cash. And then the other part to that are the expenditures. So expenditures, they're budgeted at a point in time. Mm-hmm. And so at that point in time, we're budgeting for what we know. And so oftentimes expenditures can come in either lower than budgeted. So what happens is, an example would be our snow budget. I think this is the first year that we haven't had to get a supplemental appropriation for free cash in fiscal 24 due to a mild winter. So we budget $725,000. And so say that comes in at $650,000. That delta, the $75,000, rolls right into free cash. So really, free cash is a result of all of your revenue and expenditure operations for the year.
So it isn't really free.
No. Nope.
Because it's basically money that either we couldn't anticipate was going to be coming in when we set the budget, or it's money that we thought we were going to need and then something happened, typically around personnel, because people are tricky and maybe somebody leaves their job midway through the year and that creates excess from what we had budgeted for.
Correct.
Okay, and that rolls over into the next year. So once free cash is generated or created, then what happens?
So sure, at the end of the fiscal year, so our fiscal year ends June 30th, everything closes out to fund balance. And so what happens is we take that information and report it on the balance sheet to the Department of Revenue. They then take that information and review it. And so they start at, it's called undesignated fund balance. So revenues and expenditures close out to that. So they take that and then they kind of walk through their calculations. So they look at outstanding receivables, and so they hit us for those at year end, which is, there's always receivables for property tax or personal property. Then they look at any deficit funds as of June 30th. So it could be like a grant where the timing, the payment wasn't in on time by June 30th, or sometimes there's a 90-day window where they look at receipts through September 30th. So then once the DOR does their calculation, they certify our free cash. And at that point, I think they send an email out to the mayor, the city council, notifying them that free cash has been certified. And that happens in the general fund and right now in our 4 enterprise funds. They also get their free cash certified.
What are our 4 enterprise funds?
So we have water, sewer, Mount Hood, and ambulance.
Okay. And those funds are revenues that can only be used specifically for the items that the fund is designated for.
Correct, yes.
So I think that's important for folks to understand.
Yep.
And so going back to the timeline of free cash, because I think this is really important for folks to understand, it's not always available to us. There's sort of a window when it opens for us to use, and then a window when it closes.
Correct. So as soon as it's certified, we can begin spending, but that has to be through council approval. So every supplemental appropriation goes through city council. They approve that. And so we have to expend that free cash by June 30th. Otherwise, it just rolls back into free cash for the next year.
Okay. And so what are the types of things that we do use free cash for and or should use free cash for?
So there's really 3 categories I would classify it into. Operational, so those are the supplemental appropriations you see. It's happened the past couple of years with the school operations. Mm-hmm. And then there's savings. So we always want to invest in ourselves and make sure that we're investing so that our savings represent like 5%, 10% of the operating budget. And so we have those monies available to us for unforeseen circumstances. And then capital. And so capital is really the best use for free cash because it's a one-time expenditure and it helps better invest in our community.
Mm-hmm. And anyone who's been in a Melrose building recently knows that we certainly have quite a few capital needs, lots of leaking roofs.
Yes, we do.
So when you talk about putting money aside for, as savings, we put that into certain designated accounts. So for example, a contract stabilization account, which we can then use to take money out when we need to pay for, a collective bargaining agreement that's settled. So it's a little bit of trying to prepare for some expenses that we know are coming, but we don't know the exact amount for future fiscal years.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And can you talk about why we want to avoid continuing to fund operational deficits with free cash?
Sure, yes. So one of the biggest things, we should always be using current year revenues to match current year expenditures. And so when you're using free cash, you're using revenues as a result of the prior year operation to fund the next year's budget or next year's expenditures. And that's not ideal. And it's not sustainable either. We want our revenues to be in line with our expenditures or our needs. And so the concern with that would be, we have bond rating agencies that look at us every single time we go out for significant borrowing, and that could impact our bond rating if it is a continued practice. And it's not sustainable, and it eats away at your ability to do other things.
Mm-hmm. Right, because if we're constantly using that free cash to close bigger and bigger operational deficit gaps, we don't have money to fix roofs or prepare for rainy days, both metaphorically and actually.
Yes.
And the bond rating risk is a really important one because, as folks might remember, we are going to be bonding quite a bit for the public safety building project that was approved by voters. So by making sure our free cash is being used for one-time expenses, that in turn should make that project more affordable for voters because we'll be paying at a better bond rating and a better interest rate.
Right.
Okay, I think that's really important.
It is really important.
Anything else you want to tell folks about free cash? I know it's a complicated subject and it's a lot to try to summarize in a few minutes. I appreciate you doing it.
Yes. So the 5-year average for our free cash is $5.5 million.
Okay.
And it can go either direction, right? So in 2023, we had almost $7.2 million worth of free cash certified. This year, it was just over $5 million.
Okay.
You can also have negative free cash. In Melrose, I think for residents who are newer to Melrose, there were some tough financial times in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I think that we had one year where we did have negative free cash. I think it was 1992. So I think that that's important. And just to highlight, some of the things that have happened over the past couple of years. I think it was in fiscal 20, we got a one-time $1 million payment. So that goes right to free cash. We got, in fiscal 21, a one-time building permit for $496,000. So those are the types of things that we see happening in free cash, and you would never want to build that as part of your budget. So.
Right. And our budgets are so much about paying for people, paying for our teachers and our firefighters and our police officers, and to sort of hope we can meet those salaries by waiting for the certification of free cash and the approval of the council. That really puts those positions and their ability to deliver services at risk.
It certainly does, yes.
So I'm glad that we're stepping away from free cash, not that it doesn't come with consequences, but I think we really want to be heading toward using that for one-time expenses, of which we have plenty.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Well, thank you for being here today and talking free cash with me.
Thank you.